Well, hey there folks, welcome to Groovy Geeky. Today we're going to take a look at one of my favourite film series of all time, but only a quick glance, because it's also the longest film series around, and man, I could talk forever about these flicks. Naturally, I'm talking about the Big G himself, Godzilla. So please join me as we take a look at a brief history of Godzilla. Word of warning, might not be as brief as I've initially suggested. Godzilla is truly a monster of the nuclear age, and it is impossible to truly talk about it without bringing up the political situation of the times. Godzilla could only have ever come from Japan, the country that suffered 2 nuclear attacks during World War II, as well as the, and let's hope I pronounce it correctly, Daigo Fukuryu Maru, or also known as the Lucky Dragon No. 5 incident, where a fishing boat was subjected to nuclear fallout following a US nuclear test at Bikini Atoll, resulting in the deaths of several of its crew, and the following revelations would reveal further fishing ships had been contaminated in other tests, as well as a possible contamination of Japan's food supply. This, doubled with the public's mistrust of military figures and the US occupation, created a fertile ground of nuclear fear and a belief that military strength could only cause problems, the 2 underlying themes of the original Godzilla film of 1954. While now culturally seen as a goofy blockbuster character, and even a hero, Godzilla was initially created as a monstrous terror, sheer destruction personified, and boy does this first film really make it hit home. It's a sombre, moving film, unlike B-movies of its time, and takes the concept of radioactive mutated monster further than any movie before, or arguably after, as it's not just for the monster's inception, but is also a key point of the film. Nuclear weapons are bad. All military power in the world cannot stand a chance against their destructive force. Science should not be used to create weapons. These simple, straightforward points are hammered home with scenes of survivors of Godzilla's rampage, as well as one of the main characters, Dr. Serizawa, choosing to destroy his life's work and sacrifice himself so that his discovery will never be used for war. The movie was released to a mixed reception, with some accusing it of taking advantage of the recent Lucky Dragon incident, as well as the previous atomic bombings, but the special effects were much lauded, earning the film awards and recognition, as well as kick-starting the Tokusatsu genre of films, which Gojira special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya would later take over to television with the hugely successful Ultraman franchise. Check out my video on Ultraman Max for more about that. Gojira is directed and co-written by Ishiro Honda, and would go on to become one of the most influential movies of all time, as well as providing one of the most recognisable characters in Japanese culture. An American edit of the film followed, titled Godzilla, King of the Monsters, which renamed the monster Godzilla and featured newly shot scenes featuring the actor Raymond Burr. Needless to say, a film of such success would have to be followed up. And yeah, at over 30 films later, it's safe to say that Gojira had a sequel or two. The first of these is Godzilla Raids Again, which introduces the formula that almost all of the following films would feature, as Godzilla faces off against another giant monster, or Kaiju. The first of these is Anguirus, a spiky mutated dinosaur. The film is less sombre, more crowd-pleasing blockbuster fodder with plucky heroes and monster wrestling, with one spectacular scene at Osaka Castle where the fighting monsters manage to destroy the landmark. But to me, it lacks that special factor that fit the first film so perfectly. 7 years would pass until the next Godzilla film, King Kong vs. Godzilla, but those 7 years would introduce more monster movies such as Rodan and Mothra, who would both go on to become recurring characters in the Godzilla franchise. 1962's King Kong vs. Godzilla sees Ishiro Honda return as the director and refine the idea of a blockbuster monster fight, with the two iconic movie monsters in colour for the first time, and a fun, effects-heavy film with moments of terror as well as humour. It would become the highest grossing Godzilla film in history, and actually remains one of my favourites. Honda wanted a more child-friendly Godzilla, one that would appeal to a new, younger audience of cinema goers, and to be honest, it works so well. Godzilla would take on another monster in its next film, Mothra vs. Godzilla, which sees the Big G take on a giant moth goddess monster who previously starred in 1961's excellent Mothra. Again, another of my favourite monster films. This film sees Godzilla return to its meaner ways, as well as some excellent effects, some fun characters, and the introduction of Mothra's twin offspring following the death of the original Mothra. But for Godzilla to kill a monster as powerful as Mothra would surely set it up as the most powerful monster around, right? Well, not for long anyways. Ah yes, now we come to the biggest monster bash so far, as a foe appears that is so powerful that it takes the combined forces of Godzilla, Rodan, and Mothra to defeat. We are finally introduced to King Ghidorah in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. We are treated to an interesting political thriller plot as a princess is on the run from assassins. But oh no! She's been possessed by the spirit of a Venusian who has come to Earth to warn us that Earth will soon be attacked by King Ghidorah, a vastly powerful alien monster who travels from planet to planet, destroying all in its path. Based as a modern take on the traditional Japanese monster Yamata no Orochi, Ghidorah is a three-headed golden dragon which shoots devastating gravity beams from its heads as it flies around, and the scenes of destruction are some of the best from this period. The film would also introduce more humorous elements, as Godzilla, Rodan and Mothra would sit down to talk in an attempt to settle their differences, with the Big G hilariously suggesting that it only attacks humans because they keep bullying it. We get some fun, awesome fight scenes, and Ghidorah manages to escape the combined power of these three kaiju, ready to return for a rematch. Invasion of Astro Monster, or Godzilla vs Monster Zero, is the next in the series, and starts the soon-to-be recurring theme of alien invasions, as the Exilians from Planet X use a mind-controlled Ghidorah in their attempt to take over Earth. It's a classic film, though perhaps best known for one of its more infamous moments. With Godzilla now firmly a global superstar, we would start to see the inevitable decline in quality, with the next film being Ebirah: Horror of the Deep, which is a bizarre film with an almost James Bond-like quality to its human story, but despite featuring three monsters in Godzilla, Mothra and the titular Ebirah, remains an okay, if mostly forgettable film. The following movie, on the other hand, is hard to forget. Introducing the character of Minya, say hello to Godzilla's adopted son in the film Son of Godzilla. A light-hearted, fun and enjoyable romp featuring giant radioactive bugs and a really sweet ending showing us that Godzilla is capable of compassion. But where to go from there? Such a light-hearted film. Well, destroy all monsters, of course. A blockbuster set in the future featuring all Godzilla's previous foes, as well as monsters from other movies such as Varan and Baragon. Aliens try to take over the world by controlling all the monsters, but they break free and head towards the alien base, causing them to release their ultimate weapon, King Ghidorah, who is soundly defeated by all the other monsters and eventually killed. Rest in peace, my sweet golden prince. Despite poor acting, recycled footage, and aging effects, the film is highly regarded as a high point of the genre. And after such a celebration of kaiju films, the only way is up, surely. And so next we are treated to All Monsters Attack, or Godzilla's Revenge, which, no, I can't do it. I can't. Let's just move on.
Thanks for saving me.
Why'd you come here?
I just wanted to see you.
Your folks will get kind of worried, won't they?
I don't think so. They're hardly home any time at all.
The next proper Godzilla film is Godzilla vs Hedorah, one of my favourites. A psychedelic mess as Godzilla tackles an alien pollution monster who causes people to hallucinate or just kills them when it exposes them to its acid. It receives a mixed reception amongst fans, with some loving it for its weirdness and others hating it for its bizarre tone. I love things that are weird and try new stuff, so I absolutely adore this film, and Hedorah is one of my favourite monsters. What follows is the largely bland Godzilla vs Gigan, which features some abysmal acting, a slow, boring, plodding story about more alien invaders, which admittedly does have a couple of decent moments, such as the realisation that they are alien cockroaches, a weakened Ghidorah, as this film is set before Destroy All Monsters, and a uniquely silly monster design in Gigan, who actually deserved a much better film because it's a decent monster. Luckily, he returns in Godzilla vs. Megalon to assist the titular giant bug monster against Godzilla and his new friend, the robot Jet Jaguar. This film is fun and goofy and really enjoyable, despite relying on stock footage a bit too much, like the previous film. We now come to the final two movies of the Showa Era, starting with Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, a fun, if flawed movie about Godzilla taking on its mechanical counterpart whilst aliens try to invade Earth, as well as introducing the classic Mechagodzilla, who would go on to define a whole aesthetic of robotic animals, such as those featured in Transformers and Zoids, and the amazing poodle monster King Caesar. We are treated to some glorious battle scenes, as the director decided to give Mecha G every weapon and ability imaginable, from protective shields to mouth lasers to rocket fingertips. However, the series' popularity was in major decline and needed refreshing. With Ishiro Honda back in the director's seat and a new, darker, more adult tone, Terror of Mechagodzilla would refresh the series. It is an excellent film and adds a mad scientist and early transhuman elements into what would have been a relatively formulaic story. Here we actually care about the humans for the first time since the mid-60s, and the new monster, Titanosaurus, is highly regarded, recalling back Anguirus as an almost realistic monster opponent for Godzilla. Despite being a better film than several of the previous entries, it fared poorly in the box office and sealed Godzilla to an early retirement, one it would not escape from until 1984. The period of Godzilla films made in the 50s, 60s and 70s is known as the Showa period, and is fondly remembered for its big cheesy battles and variety of film types. It is also during this time that Godzilla became a massive global icon, its mere name regularly being used to describe something as overly large or angry, such as the term Bridezilla. Very few characters have that honour. Godzilla was not just stuck in a cinematic world though, with a comic series via Marvel Comics and appearances in the Toho television series Zone Fighter. The Godzilla films would become especially popular in America, being shown in drive-through theatres and later on budget television stations, but here in the UK it has never had as much of a big cultural impact, and finding Godzilla related merchandise, articles and media is a bit of a struggle, and I often end up importing items straight from Japan because of this. And boy was there a lot of Godzilla merchandise around at the time, from fancy dress costumes to toys which have now become legendary collector's items. Godzilla was perhaps the first example of a multimedia franchise merchandised in every possible avenue. I initially intended this to be a one-off brief history of Godzilla, but I get the feeling I'll just go on and on for hours, so let's leave this as part 1 of my not so brief history, and I'll catch you next time for some part 2 of some more kaiju talk. Bye! Thanks for watching this episode. If you'd like to see more episodes on cool, groovy, geeky, gamey, musicy stuff, then subscribe to the channel and ring that bell, and if you want to be a groovy cat, leave a comment and a like, and I'll love you. Bye!